Well, my name's Gerlach, and I'm a research engagement specialist at URSA. And my role includes finding out what researchers need from their digital tools, helping the team develop those tools in such a way that they meet researchers' needs, and teaching researchers how to use them, and also promoting them. And I think that because I'm an ex-researcher, that really helps to understand how to communicate with researchers and engage them. Is anyone in here a researcher or an ex-researcher? Yes? Okay, excellent. I'd love to hear your feedback. Most people love to hear about about themselves and their career, and definitely had some good feedback from researchers who like this stuff talked about. So URSA, the company I work for, are the digital research tools hub in South Australia. We have high-powered computing and remote storage, cloud computing, and we are also the local hub for Australia's digital tools that are provided at no cost to researchers, such as Nectar Cloud Computing and the RDS storage. Talking a bit about Nectar Cloud Computing as one of the main things that I try and help people learn how to use as a free resource. So that was my research group that I joined in 2012 as a graduate student. And we were a conservation genetics group, and I joined the group just as it was getting its first next generation sequencing data sets after previously having very small genetic sequence. And for the first time, the group was grappling with how to cope with this large amount of data, how to analyze it. There were new analysis tools that were being created and being updated very frequently to deal with this data. And we were having to grapple with using the command line for the first time. We were doing it in the terminal application on Mac computers. And I was talking to the group about why not try Nectar Cloud Computing, a free resource where you can have much greater number of CPUs and RAM available, but they were all a bit scared of doing that, and therefore spent lots of money on these souped up Mac Pros with lots of cores, etc. And some very amusing times where people would be remoting into the Mac Pro to use it, and someone else would be sitting at the Mac Pro trying to use it, and everyone's fighting over the mouse, and people closing down people's terminals and therefore shutting down their analysis, etc. It was a bit of a drama. So I spent a bit of time learning how to use Nectar, and the first time I logged onto it, I followed all the instructions that were online, and it took me to the point where I had set up the virtual machine and logged on, and then the instructions ended there, and I had a blank virtual machine. I typed in ls, and there was just nothing on it, and it scared the bejesus out of me, and I walked away and didn't use it again for 3 months. But then, you know, I got a few more skills, talked to a few more people, and I came back and learned how to download software and install it and use it. And then I made a snapshot of a good, well set up computer, and I rewrote the Nectar documentation to try and teach my co-researchers how to use those tools. And included extra tips that were not in the Nectar documentation. So that was at the end of my research graduate time, and at that time a group from Nectar were travelling around the university to find out how people were using the tools, and one of those people was my line manager from URSA, Sarah Nisbet, and I showed them the documentation I was writing for Nectar, and the next day she gave me a phone call and said, "Can you come and work for us and do that?" So right at the end of my research, I was being offered a job to do something I was already doing for free, just because I actually cared about helping researchers use these tools and to not be scared of them. So that's a bit of my background. So in these digital research tools, high-powered computing, cloud computing, there are some fields that have always been known that they have to be comfortable using technology in order to get their research done. And this is CERN with one of the first HPC computers that was installed in 1965. They're the nuclear research facility now housing the Large Hadron Collider. But there are lots of other disciplines that have previously been able to house all of their data in simple Excel spreadsheets and all of the analysis on their PC, and are just now, as our research group was in 2012, we're just now starting to get data sets that are too large, and their computation needs are becoming greater, and they are being dragged very reluctantly into the need to learn how to use these more high-powered compute tools. And generally, these people, as soon as they see a command line terminal, are scared to death. And they really don't want to have to go there, but kind of know they have to. And so a lot of my job is helping people get over that fear. It's actually not that hard. But you look at movies and the people all hacking away and they're like geniuses and they're taking down mainframes and saving the world, and it's really not that challenging. So in order to talk about researchers and understand how they work, it's really important to look at what the research career is like today. And it certainly has changed a lot in the last couple of decades. So Nature is the most eminent, highly sought after journal in science publishing. And they, in October last year, devoted an entire issue to the plight of young researchers in science. And those headlines kind of give you an idea of what they were saying. And they also did a poll to find out how many hours researchers were working. And you can see they're working, well, I would say a lot more than the average IT department worker is working. And some people would say, oh, they're working those long hours because they're really dedicated. They love their research. And researchers are dedicated. They do love their research. But I don't think that's the reason for these long hours. And I think there's a couple of other reasons there at play. So first of all, there's the fact that researchers are, you can kind of think of them as self-employed. They're running their own business. They are their own business. They have to write research grants proving that they're good enough to get money. The research grants will cover their salary. Then when they have that salary, they'll have that research grant. They'll give 10 to 20% to the university, whatever the university requires in order to be in that university. And in return, the university will give them all these services and also kind of dictate how they spend a lot of their time and give them lots of extra roles that they have to do, and act a little bit naive on how long it'll take to, how much time it takes to fulfill those roles. So if researchers want to actually get the research done that they are required to do as part of that research grant, they end up having to work late at night, weekends, public holidays, refusing to take annual leave, or when they do take annual leave saying, great, I'll have lots of free time to do some writing and get that grant done. So one of the reasons is just too many tasks, many of which are being imposed by the university. And I think, you know, obviously administration is the most annoying one, all the extra paperwork and bureaucracy, and sometimes what university IT departments are imposing on researchers can kind of come under that. And that's why it can be really hard to get researchers to engage in making changes in their practices that are being imposed by the more efficient running of the university IT department. But there's another reason why researchers are working these long hours, and that's the highly competitive nature of a research career these days. So this paper was published in 2012 in Physics World, and a quote from there: some compared academic research to a pyramid scheme that produced a tiny handful of winners and a huge number of losers in the scramble for permanent posts. And they published this very excellent diagram that they actually got from a UK government-funded study into higher education. And it shows science PhD graduates, a vast majority of which would be expecting when they started that PhD that they would follow on an academic career and eventually become a professor. And this is showing that only 3.5% will actually get a permanent position in a university, and less than 0.5% will become a professor. Another trend over the years in research is more universities taking in a lot more science PhD students. They get money out of doing that, and yet very little increase in the number of academic jobs that exist. So that's driven this hugely competitive nature. So that means a lot of researchers, and I guess a lot of the researchers that we'll be dealing with a lot, because they're the ones doing the most research and actively supervising students the most, are stuck in this cycle of short-term contracts. It used to be a single 2 to 3 year period called a postdoc before you would get your permanent position, and these days it's very common for researchers to spend 10 to 15 years cycling with short-term contracts. And we know lots of careers these days have short-term contracts. It's a problem, but in research it's a little bit worse than that, because the university almost definitely won't rehire you at the end of your contract unless you've got a grant that will cover it, or someone else has a grant that will cover your salary. So the entire time that you have your 2-year contract as an early career researcher, you're actively working towards making sure you'll be employed after that, because you know the university is not going to take care of you. This brings loyalty to the institution to an lower and lower. So researchers are overworked, they're stressed, they're very time poor. And what does that mean for us in provisioning e-research services? When we ask them to learn to use a new technology, something that's actually going to save them time and make their research better, we're asking a large time investment from them. And I feel like this is what I spend a lot of my time doing. I think I love this diagram, but I can't cite where it came from because it's all over the internet without any author's name. So they'll be reluctant to invest time unless we can really convince them it will be worthwhile, and it has to be worthwhile in the short term because they have requirements to meet for their grant. So they really need to be able to hit the ground running when they learn these new technologies. So when discussing e-research solutions with a researcher, we can't expect them to be willing to try it unless we make it easy to learn, unless we can convince them that it's going to increase their efficiency and save them time, or convince them that it will allow them to be more competitive in their research, and preferably all three. So there will be some researchers who are happy to invest a lot of time in learning how to use technologies, and that can actually improve their attractiveness in the job marketplace. If lots of research groups don't have anyone who knows how to use computers and you know how to use them really well, then you might get a job through that. But most researchers are just busy and they only want to learn as much as they need to know. So it's really important that we frame our information about using tools to what is needed to know. Keep it short and simple, and you can create modules in your training where people can expand it if they require, but make sure if your beginner's guide to using something is 2 days long, then you're not going to reach the full audience. Maybe you should think about making the tool easier to use, or really think about what is needed to know. So we want to respect the researcher's time by being focused and direct in how we provide tools. So I often think of my role as a research engagement specialist as being a translation service between researchers and IT professionals. Each of these disciplines has a lot of lingo, and they handle a lot of complex ideas, and both of these disciplines have to learn how to communicate these complex information to people who don't know the lingo, and communicate it accurately and clearly. So when writing information about how to use these tools, it's really important to use familiar words and make the meaning of the words immediately comprehensible. Focus on the researcher's point of view and don't make assumptions about prior knowledge. Make sure you're covering everything that needs to be covered. I find lots of tech stuff when they're writing documentation for researchers, I say, why didn't you include information about how to do that? Because they need to know that in order to do this. and they'll say, if they don't already know that, then maybe they shouldn't be using our service. And that's the kind of mindset that I really want to drive out, because these are tools that don't have to be hard. We shouldn't expect people to be experts in order to use them. So if you are writing training material, it's really important to get someone who's not technically proficient to read it, see if they understand it, and see if they can follow the instructions and if the instructions will work. Make sure you're not assuming anything that you oughtn't. And when you give instructions, don't be like the old, which has been updated, the old Nectar documentation that just told you how to access the service and then cut you off there. It's now been updated to include how to use it. And an example of something that I changed in my Nectar documentation and is now changed on the official Nectar documentation is teaching researchers how to use NoHub, because if you've been doing all of your analysis on your own computer and then suddenly you're moving to a remote computer for the first time, if you've not been told that you need to put this simple command in order to make sure that your analysis keeps running when you close that connection, you're just setting them up for failure. So that really becomes in the need to know. Even though that's not part of the service that you've created for them, it is in the need to know circle. So really, a bit of understanding about researchers and what they already know and don't know is really important to make sure that you're covering all of those bits of information and making sure the demonstrations are relevant to researchers. So being clear in your communication, once again, is about respecting a researcher's time and the amount of stress that they're under. So trust. A researcher's data is their most valuable asset, and they want to trust the people who are helping them to store and to analyze that data. In large institutions, streamlining services can be prioritized, and academics can view IT services as obstructive at times rather than as providers of useful service. And that can be counteracted by ensuring that researchers believe that, that your IT services are aware of what the needs of the researchers are listening to what the requirements of a particular research group are, and are willing to deliver what they require, rather than just trying to fit them into the streamlined, efficient workflow for the university. So to develop that trust, you really need to make sure researchers are feeling that connection and engagement. And another thing, if you're involved in promoting things to researchers, is that researchers are critical thinkers by nature, and they also develop their critical thinking skills as part of their career. Researchers are constantly pulling apart what they do, the peer review process, and a bit of sport. So if you're trying to use flowery language and hyperbole and telling them that your innovation will take their research to the next stratosphere and etc., they're not only going to see right through it, they'll be kind of contemptuous that you're using that on them. So you really need to concentrate on marketing the content. So you need to have a good product. The product has to be able to sell itself, and all you're doing is informing them with accurate information, very simply and clearly, what the product is and what it can do for them. And just let the product speak for itself. But the most important thing is to develop open and honest relationships. Yes, and there was a lot more I could say, and I'm always willing to talk to people a lot about this. It's a subject I'm very passionate about. And I would love to take any questions from people now. Thank you. Any questions? All right, yeah, I haven't got a lot of feedback. I think that obviously visual, some people like videos. For me personally, I don't like them, so therefore I don't develop them, because you have to sit through it at that pace. etc. So I've gotten into embedding Google Slides presentations, so you can just click through. It just takes up one screen. You don't have to scroll through lots and lots of images, but you've got your screenshots that you can just slide through with the annotations on them. That's my new favourite. I haven't really discussed with the researchers whether they're finding it useful, but the people who have, the team that developed the Nectar support were really positive and said, yeah, this is a great way of presenting the data with the information without it taking up a lot of space to scroll through. Yes? Ah, I didn't know. Oh, that's excellent. Yes, it is, and I'm constantly trying to improve it, but it takes a lot of time. And if you're using Nectar and you're thinking this article hasn't been written yet or this article needs to be improved, you can actually just lodge a support ticket, and that comes through to the team who are writing articles, and we'll improve and take that information on board. So please give us any feedback. Yes? Yep. Yeah, I've been doing that since I started there a year and a half ago. Yeah, for HPC, Nectar, and for launching RStudio in the cloud. Those are the 3 I've done so far. Yeah, and they're taken very well. Yes. Not at the moment. It's generic. Yeah, we have trouble getting people to turn up. Sometimes a lot of people register and then don't turn up, etc. Like, that's kind of the thing. But we're not allowed. We don't have access to the university email groups, so we can't really email everyone. It's really hard to get in contact with people. So we can only email people who already know about Nectar and Ursa, which is obviously a great limiting factor to getting new users to use the tools. True.
So yeah, you can have all the access to the email addresses or whatever, but you need faculty, ADRs, or the heads of school, passing that information to research.
Yes. That's a good idea, yeah. I've got a few contacts from my time at research, but I definitely need to expand that and to the other universities as well as the one that I attended. I think that's a great idea. Teach courses, and they often fill up very quickly, advertise quite well, and very long waiting lists, but then we'll have I grapple with this. I don't know what to do about it. We tried telling people that we might charge them $20 if they don't turn up, and it didn't make any difference. We didn't actually charge them because we don't want to be seen as big meanies, but we were hoping that it would be enough inducement to do it, but I don't know what to do. Please tell me if you have any ideas. Oh yeah? No. Yeah, true. Yeah. Well, see, at Ursa we're not for profit. We do charge the universities for what we deliver, including workshops. So they're free to the researcher, but we charge the universities. But they have to actually turn up in order for us to collect that money. So it's obviously a big issue where we turn up with 3 training staff and only 5 people in the room or something. So I have thought about maybe making people pay for it, and they'll get reimbursed if they actually show up or something like that from the university. But once again, it gives them another barrier to actually attending the workshop when they have to go out and get their credit card out, etc., etc. we did have good attendance then. It's enough to make them feel they've got a reason to turn up. Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah, okay. Any other questions?
Flirted with the idea of taking insurance for non-attendants, taking a chunk out of their research budget, so we can put that over their expenditure, and they'll drop that much by registering that channel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We all seem to be agreed that money has to be the deciding factor to make people turn up. What's that? Hmm. Yeah. Not yet. Well, the training was mostly in nectar-based things, so even other researchers that aren't in the universities don't have access to that. You need to be an AAF institution. But I have delivered training, but more as a promotional material, kind of for free, a demonstration of services to research groups that might want to purchase them that are outside the university. So it comes a bit more of a marketing promotional type thing, whereas in the universities we're like, you have this tool, it's free, please use it. Yeah, once again, holding that circle wheel, saying, take a bit of time putting this wheel on and you'll go faster. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for all coming to the last session when you've heard a lot this week already. Thank you.